Hi everyone! I actually made a Klaus video before this, but I felt like it was going on too long, so I went ahead and started over. Sometimes you have to talk things out before you can get your thoughts properly sorted, or at least I do a lot of the time. And even then, y'all know from my videos that I'm not always very focused. So I know you're all probably going, okay, why on earth are you doing a holiday, Christmas, depending on what you may or may not celebrate, movie this early on? And quite frankly, my response is, if anybody has a reason to be irritated about Christmas or holiday stuff being out in the stores or out different places, it would be me, because my birthday is on Thanksgiving this year. And sometimes it's it's on Black Friday here in the States, right? In fact, I've had to work on my birthday, Thanksgiving to Black Friday, because my birthday was Black Friday at a bear store that is a specialty store that I'm not going to name here, which I had fun working for them, actually. I love that company. And that particular group of people I worked with was what made that job great. But that was, ugh. So the only people who have it worse are the people who have the birthday actually near or on Christmas. So that being said, I'm going to talk about it because I happen to like the holidays and I happen to like Christmas. And last year, I was getting ready to take a leave of absence from my graduate studies to get ready to go and do another spinal fusion surgery because scoliosis and complications and But here I am a year later, and I just uploaded my thesis to the database, so I should be graduating in December, so I'm in a very festive mood. And so I figured, what better way to celebrate than with a festive movie? And thusly, I watched Klaus on Netflix, and Klaus was very surprising. It had a lot of social messages in ways that I don't feel like were entirely preachy or at all. I feel like it was very good. It's just very good storytelling, and it's just the visuals of that particular movie. Like, when I saw the preview for it, I knew I was going to watch it. Just from the visuals alone, I was like, oh, I love this. I love this so much. It's like, it was really, like, like when you get to watch something and you feel like your eyes just kind of like get to immerse into the world and kind of relax into it and be part of it. It was very much that kind of feeling for me from an animation perspective, and I really loved that, and I appreciated that so much. So the music was interesting. The characters were all very, I found them all to be very interesting. And I want people to note, if you think this is just for kids, you probably, I think you're wrong. As I say, while I'm turning 30 and have plushies behind me, but whatever, I like cute things, get over it. That, like, I also like goth things and spooky things, so, but it's like my two modes, like pink and then all black forever. But yeah, so like, sorry, yeah, it has a lot of dark humor in it, and I like that. So you open up this movie in a way that I didn't think it was going to be, and I'll say a little bit about some of the base kind of where you start at, and then it'll get into more and more spoiler territory, so just be warned now, that's what I'm going to do, okay? So we start with Jasper, who is the postman that is going to be meeting up with the woodsman, because Jasper is a rich boy who's lazy, and he's just hoping to inherit his dad's fortune, right? And so his dad, of course, has been giving him every opportunity in the world to prove himself as a, functioning adult, and he squanders them all. Okay, and this last opportunity was to be a postman, which for some reason in this world is like an incredibly militant thing. It's kind of interesting. I wish I knew more about why. I don't know if it's just to like buy into the drama, or whether or not it's trying to like satirize itself in a more self-aware kind of way, being like, yes, we know that this is kind of like an extreme thing, but it's very important. It's the basis of our whole character motivation, and it was still fun and interesting to watch in the opening sequence of scenes, but essentially Jasper is told that unless he gets his act together and is able to be a successful postman with a certain number of letters in his record book, right, before said time, he's cut off financially for the rest of his life, right? And of course his father assigns him to literally the most remote location ever. And you can only get there by ferry. And by the way, I love the ferryman. He's He's great. He's one of those characters, you know, that like pops in every so often throughout the whole movie and is just kind of there to just be a little bit ridiculous and is just a thorn in the side of the main character, and you don't mind because the main character deserves it over half the time, right? And that's the whole thing about Jasper, is you really, in a lot of ways, he's a terrible person, especially like in the beginning. You want to hate him, of course, but by about midway through the film, you start to, and actually for me it was a little earlier than that, you start to root for him. You start to realize that maybe he's not necessarily just an entirely rotten person. He's just not ever been exposed to anything else, and when he has been, he actually has shown the capacity to care. But it's still wrapped up in a scheme for a good most of the film. And of course his scheme is this. He arrives at that town. This is where it starts to get more spoilery. He arrives at this town, okay? And it's ruled by two feuding families. And by feuding, I mean, this is the dark humor part. It is body bag. There's the people carrying a body bag across the street. There's children building snowmen that are like putting carrots slowly into the snowman while staring at him creepily. And like carrots and like knives, right? And it's just really unnerving. And he gets there, and of course the post office is drafty. It has holes in it. There's snow everywhere. There's chickens that live in there with him. They literally live in the little cubby holes for the ingoing and outgoing post, right, for everybody's household and everybody's different. Well, actually, I think it might be for each town. I'm not sure. But that part was interesting. I really liked that. So he finds out through some trying to get to know the townsfolk that, you know, there's this one little boy who's very alone, right? He's basically locked in the house. Like, it's really horrifying. Like, there's definitely some child abuse going on here. And everybody in that town is immensely unhappy and quite frankly homicidal. And he ends up going, and this kid tries to give him it's like this. Well, actually no, this kid gives him this kid's drawing falls out the window, and he's trying to actually extort the child into giving him money so he can give him back the drawing that fell out the bars of his second story window as a letter, so he can have mailed a letter and start to meet that quota his father set for him. So moving along, he ends up going over to the woodsman's house because he notices it on the map in this post office, and he goes up there because he has nothing better to do because he feels like everything's futile. And he gets there and he thinks the woodsman's an axe murderer, and it's all pretty comical and horrifying. And it turns out, of course, Klaus, the woodsman, has a bunch of toys in this like workshop that are stowed away, and so eventually Jasper gets this idea that, hey, like, what if I wrapped up one of these toys and gave it to this kid who's really sad, because he's trying to like get into the woodsman's good graces, right? And he does, and then his letter scheme happens where he realizes, because he gets children who want also to get a new toy. And he's like, well, if you give me this money for postage, then I can send your letter, and then you can get a toy, and stuff like that. So yes, he's kind of a terrible character. And this is our main character, one of them. And so at first he's doing it because he feels like he has to, and it's his selfish want. Much in the same way that the children selfishly want toys because their life has been freaking miserable, and they want some kind of fun and or joy in their life, right? So, yeah, eventually, the whole, Klaus knows, like when you're good and bad, that kind of thing starts to be a thing for reasons I'm not going to get into. And so, again, first the children are acting good and kind because they still want a toy, not because they want to be good or kind. And then later on, it's just, it starts to be that they realize that, well, actually playing with the feuding family's kid is fun, and I like playing with them, and I don't care who they are. But they don't say things like that. It's just mainly by actions shown in the movie, which I found refreshing because storytelling. And then eventually the adults start getting influenced by these attitudes in different ways. One of my favorite sequences is actually the women, and there's like a mom. I'm assuming it's a mom. It may be an aunt, maybe a grandma. I don't know. But anyway, just know that it's one feuding family person and another feuding family person, and she brings over like berries, and then the other one brings over jam, and then she goes back and brings over like a pie. And every time they bring back something like, like, I went up to you kind of thing. And I thought that was really interesting because it reminds me, like during the holidays and during Christmas time, there is that, there's always that one person, or heaven forbid, lots of people who are trying to one up each other, especially at like holiday baking, like cookie, like I don't know if anybody's ever gone to like cookie exchanges or cookies and carols, or you have a holiday bake sale, or you have maybe just your family getting together to eat things together. And there's always that kind of like, I don't know, for some people, it's just like this weird competition thing. Like if they don't have like the best thing that they gave, they somehow are not worth anything in life. First of all, seek some validation somewhere else. What is wrong with you? Like, you have some issues. But like, we all do stuff like that sometimes, I feel like. But when people do it to excess, I'm just kind of like, you okay there, buddy? So the film addresses stuff like that. And again, it's showing it to you. It's not telling you through like necessarily word to word, like mouth to mouth interactions. And there's a bunch of other stuff that happens too. One of my favorite characters, and I don't want to get too much into her because she definitely has her own parallel character development thanks to everything that's going on in the town and the way the townsfolk's attitudes are changing towards each other, is the teacher. And she ends up doing what a lot of teachers here in the United States do, because we're ridiculous and don't fight the way we should for children to have well-funded education, well-subsidized education. Our teachers in this country oftentimes get menial paychecks, which is ridiculous because they have unions, and yet somehow they still don't have a living wage. In a lot of cases, not all cases, because the value of the dollar is different depending on where you live and what state, and then even what part of what state. I'm not going to get into that, but just know the cost of living shifts considerably. Which is why a lot of people leave some states to go to others, is because they're just trying to survive financially, and that's what happened to my family. Anyway, this teacher in Klaus is has savings to try and get out of that little town, but as the town starts to change and she starts to realize that she actually has students who want to learn, and it's the thing that she has a passion for and what she's always wanted to do, and she's getting the chance to do it finally, and be of assistance to these kids, and have community. She starts to take her savings out and puts it back into the schoolhouse. And I felt like that was also a commentary as well about what can happen when you have people who are so afraid of like their children being taught the wrong things at school, like being friendly to other people's kids, like in the feuding families, which they didn't want, or just for them to learn like anything in general that was different from what they wanted to tell them as a family, that they wouldn't send their kids to school, and suddenly they would. And this kind of like that's very interesting. There was even a point initially when the kid started to be nice to another child from a feuding family, that the elders came in and were like, we know, they giving him this long history lecture and telling him, we know you didn't mean to disrespect your heritage, which I thought was a very interesting choice of words, given some horrific things that still go on in this world, about people teaching teaching children to hate, right? And I think that was. Ooh. So again, Klaus is very much like, I know people say, oh, it's an animated flick, oh, it's Christmassy, it's gonna be fun and festive, and I'm like, it's gonna be a little heavy. It can be a little heavy for you, okay? But I liked it. Again, it had plenty of dark humor. It has some pretty funny moments if you're into more like dark humor, dark comedy. Again, kind of like the kids that are creepy staring with the snowman and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it isn't without humor. It has a lot of other messages that it tries to deliver, trying to illustrate to people that to give in everyday life and to love in everyday life is part of the Christmas spirit, right? Or the holiday spirit. And I think that's a very beautiful thing. and I really enjoyed Klaus a lot for that reason. I think that about covers it. The only other thing I wanted to say is I noticed that it had Sami, little girl, who came and kept talking to Jasper, the postman, and he kept brushing her off every time, which was awful. Like, it was really awful, especially since Sami people are like they're an ethnic minority, and they're oftentimes not. They're treated differently anyway. At least historically, that has been so, and it's still. Anyway, yeah. So, but the way they brought in the Sami was kind of interesting. I had some mixed feelings about it, but I thought it was neat to even see, like, to even have the visibility of a Sami family and character in this was neat. And also they end up being of assistance to Klaus, and also the whole thing where it's, you know, you may not get the family you want, like in Klaus's case where he lost his wife, right? And he was never able to have children, which is why he had all those toys stockpiled. But he ended up getting the family he needed, right? And they help him make the toys and different things, at least until, and this is big spoiler, because it's the end of the film. So if you don't want to know, don't watch this part, okay? Okay. At least until Klaus dies. Okay. So Klaus dies, but it's heavily implied that the spirit of his wife, which is actually present throughout the entire film, and I'm not going to say how, you'll know when you see it, may help have made his spirit also immortal. And so he could continue to bring joy to people at least once a year. So they don't really go into how that is, they just leave it at that, at the end of the movie, and I thought that was also very beautiful. And also just kind of explaining that there's, you know, that, again, kind of, it's a pun, but the Christmas spirit, right? So that's Klaus. It's a really good film. If you haven't watched it, I recommend going and watching it again. It's not going to be like a bouncy, toilet humored Christmas film like a lot of American Christmas kid films seem to be. I don't know if toilet humor is the right thing, but it's just like this weird kind of juvenile humor. It has kind of moments like that, but not, because these are like, again, it's more of a dark comedy. It's more of, it has some dark, well, not dark comedy, it has dark comedic moments. And so you have to be okay with that. If you're not okay with that, you may not have a good time. But I still feel like you should give it a chance. And if anything, just because it is so beautifully animated, it's really beautifully animated. Like, I really enjoyed it. And I hope you do too. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign off for now. My back is stiff, the sun is coming out, the rain is going away, and the desert continues to have weird weather changes. We actually had a tornado in Nevada. Yeah. So you take care, y'all, as you're able, and I hope to make another update soon, okay? If you celebrate Thanksgiving, enjoy it. Hopefully, don't get into too many fist fights with your relatives, okay? So, yeah, take care as you're able, everybody. Bye-bye.